Today is March 24th, 2015. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library in Dix Hills, New York. We are interviewing Meyer Steinberg, a World War II veteran from the Special Engineers Detachment of the Army Corps of Engineers, in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project and as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project. Thank you so much, Meyer, for being here today and for participating in our project.
Thank you for having me here.
Meyer, where and when were you born?
I was born on July 10th, 1924 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And what were your parents' names and what did they do?
My parents' names were Frida and Louis Jacob Steinberg. My mother was a business lady, and she operated a store in Astoria, a dry goods store. My father was a millinery worker, making ladies' hats, especially for Easter.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any siblings? What were their names and genders?
Yes, I had a brother. His name is Bernard Steinberg.
Did he serve in the military?
He served in the military. Also, he's younger than I, about 4 years younger.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, he's no longer alive, though.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
He died several years ago.
He was in the service same time as you, or?
No, he was in the service after he was in the Korean War.
Oh, I see. Now, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I attended school. I went to high school, and I entered Cooper Union School of Engineering and spent three years there. We were in a very rapid course because it was during the war, because I entered in 41 and graduated in 44. Interesting thing that when I first entered there, it was a very historical thing. I went to Cooper Union School of Engineering, and we were sitting in the Great Hall on 8th Street. There's the Cooper Union building there, and I heard Roosevelt declare war on Japan on Monday.
Wow!
It was the day after Pearl Harbor Day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all of the teachers and the administration said we should enlist in the Army, and we'll be allowed to finish school while we're going to technical school at that time. Mm-hmm. So I went home to my mother, and I said, I'm going to join. She says, no, you don't. She says, you're getting a deferment from the local board, the Army, the school board, the board, because you're going to technical school. Mm-hmm. Well, most of my colleagues joined, but I didn't, with several others here. What happened is during the third year, they called them up during the Battle of the Bulge. They called them up anyway.
Wow. And
some of them never came back. I was allowed to finish. Mm-hmm. But the day I graduated, I went up to the Woolworth building where they were hiring people on the gaseous diffusion plant. It was M.W. Kellogg, an engineering company, that was hiring, and they put me in the Army reserves here. And I didn't know this at the time, but that was the entrance to the Manhattan Project.
Oh, wow. That was in 44?
That was in 44, June of 44.
So you had finished your degree?
I just finished the degree. I was ready to be drafted, but then they took me up at the M.W. Kellogg there as a chemical engineer to work on the Manhattan Project.
Wow. So was that considered being drafted or no?
Yeah, it was drafted. It was a draft. It was actually a draft.
So how long were you there until you departed for training camp? Did you have to go to training camp?
No, what happened is I was put in the reserves at the time in civilian clothes. But what I did was I was stationed at Belleville, New Jersey, where they were preparing pipe that went down to a place called Oak Ridge. I didn't know what they were going on there.
The Tennessee.
There was the Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which later became the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where the gaseous diffusion plant was being built. Mm-hmm. So we inspected about 20 miles of pipe, was nickel plated, and as a chemical engineer, I was supposed to supervise that and to see that the plating was tight and was ready to go down there to be protected from the work that had to be done down there.
Before it was shipped down to
Before it was
Oak Ridge.
shipped down there,
I
the
see.
20-foot pipe, anywhere from 4 inches up to 36 inches,
Wow.
a pipe
Wow.
went into that plant.
So how long were you there then, doing that kind of work?
I was there about 8 or 9 months till the end of the year.
And then?
And then they shipped me down to Los Alamos, where by that time I knew what they were doing, because they never told us what we're going to be working on. But at that time I already knew a little bit that we were going to be working on an atomic bomb.
Wow.
At the time, because they told us to read a little book called Uranium. It was a book by DeMont and Dake, and there was one page which was it was bent down all the time from so many people reading it. It was quoting Einstein, who said that an atomic bomb can be built. You see, so then we knew what was going on there. But I was there about a few weeks there before they signed me I was there in the reserves for a while. Then they sent me to Fort Leonard Wood for basic training.
Where's that?
That's in Missouri, in near St. Louis, 300 miles outside of St. Louis, here at Fort Leonard Wood. And there they gave me a uniform, and I went through basic training.
You
They
did?
sent me back. They sent me. I wasn't supposed to, but my papers got lost. So I was supposed to be there 2 weeks, get my uniform, go back to my technical work there. But Captain Cohen says your papers didn't come through. So I spent 11 weeks in basic training
Wow.
before I went back
In Missouri?
in Missouri,
Okay.
and went back to Los Alamos, where there I started work on the separation of U-235 from 239, from making the first material for the atomic bomb.
How did you know how to do that? I mean,
Well, we had the background of chemical engineering, and this was a chemical engineering project. The building that we were the process that we were working on was the gaseous diffusion plant. You see, at that time, there were several different methods of separating U-235. U-235 is fissionable. U-239 is non-fissionable. And the 235 in natural uranium is only 0.7%. In order to be able to make a bomb, you have to go over 90%. And you hear what's going on with Iran and other places today in building a bomb. They say they're only making it for reactors, which you don't need to go more than 20% here. Once they go up to 90%, they're going to make a bomb. And that's what we were trying to do, to get up to higher concentrations for making a bomb.
Oh, I see.
And there were three different methods of separation, which we learned about, and which was being experimented on at K-25. One was the gaseous diffusion plant. This was, the method is of gasifying uranium, making uranium hexafluoride, UF6, and that what you do is you try to perforate nickel tubing with holes in it so that the smaller U-235 goes through the holes and concentrates, and so each stage increases the amount of concentration of U-235 here. And you have to build a tremendous plant to do this. We had 3,000 stages to be able to do this here.
Wow.
And that plant was built on a signature of Roosevelt for $1 billion. Wow. It was one of the largest plants in the world. It was about 1.5 miles long, actually. And it was built, and we started to make uranium-235. By the end of 44, the beginning of 45, we started to get enough uranium to be able to send to Los Alamos to fashion it into a bomb here at the time here. The other two methods of electromagnetic separation and also of centrifuges, they knew about that, but they didn't have the technology for the high speed. There was a professor at the University of West Virginia that knew about about doing this at very high speeds, here, but they didn't have the bearings for it at the time. Now we have the bearings, and this is what Iran is trying to do now. It's using that the centrifuges. We have electromagnetic, and we had the thermal diffusion, which was a way of heating it in tubes and being able to generate the increased U-235.
So it didn't take that long to develop, actually.
It took the original separation factor that's another interesting fact, was performed at Columbia University. And by the way, General Groves, that's why it was named the Manhattan Project, because the original separation factor for separating U-235 from 239 was done at Columbia University. So he called it the Manhattan Project, and that it went for the whole program then. So and that took that was in 1943, 44. They started. They got that, and then applied this in this big plant, which had to be designed by a chemical engineer. There was a guy from MIT who designed this place, and the M.W. Kellogg. I worked for a division of that, was Kellex, who designed that plant and built that plant for $1 billion.
Wow.
That plant operated for a while, and it was the largest plant in the world at the time here. And since then, it was decommissioned, and it's being taken apart. In fact, it's practically all gone by now.
That's in New York?
No, in Los Alamos, in Oak Ridge.
Oh, Oak Ridge.
The engineering work was done in New York here, but the construction of that was down at Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Were
Oak
they
Ridge
able
National Laboratories
Right.
now.
They had to test this out, right?
Yeah, we did the testing at Oak Ridge.
At Oak Ridge.
Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Okay, that's really fascinating. So you didn't really have to receive any specialized training because you had it.
We had as a chemical engineer, we
Right.
knew how to design the plant, how to work the plant. We tested the plant here, and operated it at the time, which was quite a job. They had 60,000 workers build that plant during the war. And they were on tents up and down the valleys down in Tennessee at the time.
Were they all in the military?
No, these were construction workers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. The people that operated it were, young fellows like us, and also the supervision with the officers were in the military here, but they had to have special training,
right?
Just like we did.
Right. You were in your 20s, I guess, right?
I was just there,
young.
21 at the time.
Wow.
When I started.
How did you adapt to military life? Like the regiment of you eventually were in the military.
Yeah, I have to finish the story because what is, although we started, when they shipped me down to Los Alamos, what we did there was to finish in making the bomb, the actual bomb itself, which is done at Los Alamos, and there we had to take the uranium and make it a metal out of it and a ball of U-235. Well, a whole series of reactors were built on the West Coast here of the graphite reactors where you converted the uranium to UF6. Where did we get the other way of concentrating the uranium here? What we did, we got the reactors were built and converted the. There are two isotopes. One was U-235, which we separated at Oak Ridge, and the other was making your plutonium. Mm-hmm. Plutonium was the other method for making for an atomic bomb here, because they were fissionable. And the way that was made was in reactors, where you built a nuclear, just like a power plant we have today, the uranium reactors, was converted to U-235 by absorbing a neutron and producing plutonium-239. And that was done at Hanford, Washington, where all these large reactors were built. And there were graphite with uranium in it and converted to 239. Then they dissolved it up in nitric acid, and they shipped the plutonium in this liquid to Los Alamos, where we took it now and converted it from U-239 through various. First we used oxalic acid to precipitate to make it plutonium oxalate. Then we oxidized it to plutonium oxide, and then converted it to plutonium tetrafluoride, and then reduced it with with magnesium to plutonium metal, and made a ball of plutonium-239 at over 90% concentration on that. And that was the heart of the plutonium bomb. So you have two bombs. One was a U-235 bomb, and one was a plutonium bomb.
Why? What's the difference? Why have two different types?
Well, because because of whether you can make enough of it, here, because there's just a certain amount of U-235 available in nature.
Oh.
And so you had to make plutonium-238 was converted to 230, and that was most of it. There's only 0.7% of U-235 in the mineral, whereas with 238 you can make 100% or over 99% converted from plutonium from 238 in a reactor here. So, and then these two bombs were made with two different types. One was plutonium, was the 239.
Do they have different effects?
No, it's just very similar in the energy splitting of the atom, and use that in the implosion device. Now at Los Alamos, they invented the bomb with the implosion device to bring it to a critical mass, and then it would explode on that and create the bomb itself here. And so so I was in the operation of converting it to UF6 to plutonium tetrafluoride before they converted it to metal. We worked around the clock, 24 hours a day. I was on shift work at the time. Complete changing clothes, because it was now here we dealt with a lot of radioactivity at here. We had to be careful on that. So changing clothes, we had film badges on there to watch our
exposure
to the to radiation here.
Wow.
And, yeah.
So did you do that the whole time you were in the?
Yes, during the whole time I was there at Los Alamos. It was over a year, and we made the first two bombs for the amounts of plutonium and uranium for the bombs that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the time.
You didn't? And did you serve? Where did you serve the whole time there in Los Alamos?
In Los Alamos, right. First, well, I was at Oak Ridge, but there, and then in uniform at Los Alamos for almost a year and a half.
Was it? I mean, it sounded like a very dangerous job, a very dangerous place, actually. You just
today it's a lot more. We had to take some risks there. General Groves was a penny pinching general at the time, and he said he was supposed to put us in the hospital every once a month. We never did. We had a little film badge which showed whether you got enough radiation or not on it here, but most of it was ingestion. So we had masks we had to wear, so we wouldn't absorb, inhale any of the radioactivity here.
Did people get sick? Were there any accidents?
Oh yeah, we had. Well, it was a very, very famous accident afterwards. But let me tell you first about the fact that the first tests were made at Alamogordo, which is a couple hundred miles in the desert in New Mexico here, where they tested the first bomb on July 16th, and it was very successful. And then
what year was that?
That was 1945, and they used in 1945 they used we had Hiroshima first, and then we had Nagasaki afterwards. You know, so. Well, another interesting fact was that the Hiroshima bomb was not tested. Actually, that was the two pieces of uranium-235 were knocked together, were shot together to get the critical mass. The implosion device with the plutonium were used on Nagasaki. Well, the one that wasn't tested worked, and we had the pre-test for the Nagasaki bomb was worked also. So both of them worked. Several months later, I got a call from my mother that there was an explosion. See, we were still working over there, making additional amounts of fissionable material for more bombs. Actually, at the time, because actually, the end of the war, a week later, Japan surrendered anyway in here. But this was now afterwards. We kept on making them. But a couple of months later, before the end of '45. My mother called me up. There was an article in the New York Times. There was an explosion at Los Alamos, and half the mesa got blown off the map. So I called my mother. I said, "We haven't heard anything about this. Nothing at all. We didn't see anything else." Well, evidently there was an accident that happened, and it was leaked to the New York Times at the time. What it was a Canadian physicist by the name of Lou Slotin was experimenting with called tickling the dragon's tail. What it was is that he was experimenting with two hemispheres of plutonium and determining the neutron multiplication, because as these two came together, you get critical masses, and it would build up enough neutrons to be able to explode. But he would measure. It was a physics experiment at the time. Well, what happened? He was manipulating this with a screwdriver.
He was with you.
He was manipulating these two hemispheres with a screwdriver.
Where was he? In Los Alamos.
In Los Alamos, in a laboratory, which was one in the valley, right next to Los Alamos,
okay.
in a laboratory built for that purpose here at the time. But and he had a physicist watching him, a guard on the outside, because the secrecy was unbelievable at the time. You know, the classified information was impossible. You know, so what happened? What was reported is his hand slipped. The two hemispheres came together. As soon as that happened, before it would explode, he threw it apart. But by that time, he got so irradiated that he had to be buried in a lead cast. It was so here. So I called my mother up. I says, I didn't have anything to do with that experiment, but I explained what happened at the time, though, except for Lou Slotin, who got hurt. The guard on the outside recovered. He had radiation, but he recovered. You know, my mother said, Meyer, I told you not to fool around with that stuff.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Wait, did he die? He didn't die instantly.
It took him about 2 weeks before he died of leukemia. He was a Canadian physicist. They called his parents down there, and he was gone. It was that time. So that was the only first accident. There were a couple of other accidents there since that time, but here lately, but they weren't anywhere near as dangerous as that. Now that experiment is done remotely. It's remote controlled if they want to do that here.
Were you allowed to talk about your work?
No, not to anyone. We were with all our letters going in and out of Los Alamos were censored at the time, and we used to go down Los Alamos to Santa Fe. Los Alamos is about 50 miles outside of Santa Fe, so we had. On weekends, we'd go down there, have some fun, on that. And we had a lot of, we had about 5 or 6 Nobel Prize winners up there at the time. At Los Alamos, very famous physicist. We had Enrico Fermi, who was from Italy, and we had, in fact, as I mentioned, this document here, which it was signed by. I signed it, even though I wasn't at the first test here.
You want to just hold it up?
This test, yeah. Here about I'd say the undersigned in grateful appreciation of a joint association in the Los Alamos, New Mexico project, hereby lists below a lasting record of friendship spent in working on the world's greatest secrets. And there's General Groves here, J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, Thompson, a number of physicists, Nobel Prize winners here. And, of course, I was a PFC, and I signed that document even though I wasn't at the site. I was at Los Alamos. Wow. I made the first two bomb.
And the date on that document?
Yes, there's the date of July 16th, 1945 at Alamogordo.
Nice. Wow. So most of the other servicemen you were with or people working there were
graduate engineers and scientists at the time, yes. They were in the Corps of Engineers also. Of course, the top scientists like Oppenheimer and Fermi and others, Edward Teller here. He was very controversial. He thought that the atomic bomb was enough, but he wanted to make the fusion bomb, the hydrogen bomb, which came later on here, and they were not in uniform. They were older people anyway,
So you established camaraderie and friendships with these people, other engineers.
Yes, engineers and with scientists.
Did you keep in touch with any of them
afterwards for quite a while? Yeah, and we used to go hiking around all the mesas up in Los Alamos there, and around Los Alamos.
Must have been very hot.
Yeah. No, it was in the mountains, actually.
Oh, I see.
The Sangre de Cristo Mountains, actually, it was very nice. The weather was terrific. In fact, the Los Alamos was chosen by Oppenheimer. It was a horse farm at one time for learning how to ride horse when he was a kid. He selected that place because it was very remote. In fact, it was several hundred feet above the desert floor. So it was up high. In fact, they had to build a special road up there at $1 million a mile to go up there at the time here.
How did you get, let's say you had off time, recreational time. Did you leave? You said you left the base and went into...
Yeah, we went into Santa Fe, had fun. In fact, one time we went to the Grand Canyon over there and that's a claim to fame, too. Two of my colleagues here who was with me in Los Alamos, we walked down on the Bright Angel Trail. It was 1 mile down here and 8 miles down on the Bright Angel Trail, and we stayed overnight and came back on the trail 12 miles up. It was quite a hike.
You hiked all that?
Yeah, we hiked down there, stayed overnight, and came back. So it was one of the highlights we had. I recently went to the North Shore, North Rim, and so that not as nice as the South Rim where we were back. It's going back 70 years now.
Wow.
That was 1945.
You still keep in touch with anyone from that time?
Not recently. I've lost contact here. In fact, I had a picture In fact, I was going to show you the picture of
Okay.
us at the.
Do you have it handy?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay.
I have it handy right here. Just a minute.
Oh, great. Was that on your hike?
Yeah, this was the hike down there.
Oh, why don't you sit down and hold it up?
Two of my buddies over there at the time.
Hold it up a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, several years later, we had a 30th anniversary. It was more like a 50th anniversary afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I met one of the guys here, and I looked at him. He was so gray at the time. And I said, I took that picture. I says, which one are you?
Yeah.
He says, I'm not on it. I took the picture.
Good. Good. Nice. Wow.
At the time, yeah.
So you were in until, what was your...
Well, I didn't get discharged. So what happened was I had to stay in 2 years, and it was in March. I had another 6 months to go, or no, 3 months to go. This was March of '46 now, and they said, well, if you sign up for another 2 years to come back to Los Angeles to work with at the laboratory now. So I did that, but I went home first, and then with a number of my buddies, we signed up. We came back there, and we decided to be discharged, and I left
No
at
more.
the time. No more.
Okay.
Yeah.
What year was that? 46?
46, yeah. I was
46.
about 2 years in service, actually, the active service
Okay.
at the time.
Now, when the war, where were you? You were down there when the war ended.
Yes, the 1945.
45. And
I was 15.
when it ended, were you sent home right away, or
No, we stayed there.
You stayed there.
Yeah, we were still making material for the future bombs.
Okay.
Yeah,
So when you
that's
got
right.
discharged, I mean, you had the option to re-up, but you decided not to.
Well, we did. We signed up, then went home and decided to quit. And that was it.
So how were you received by family and community?
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went back to graduate school
Oh, where?
after that. I went to Brooklyn Poly, because I went to Cooper Union School of Engineering, as I said before, and then I went to Brooklyn Poly, which is Polytechnic Institute of New York, which is now part of NYU as well.
How,
Yeah.
was that for a PhD or master's?
It was a master's. I was going for my PhD, but then I started had to go to work. Got married, and decided not to. I had a few credits towards my doctorate at the time.
So it's a master's in engineering? Or
Yeah, in chemical engineering.
chemical
right.
engineering.
Then I got a job at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and I stayed there 40 years.
Really? Wow. Where were you living when you worked in Brookhaven?
We lived here in Melville.
Okay.
Actually, here I had a 35-mile trip.
It's a long trip.
Long trip before the expressway was built at the time, all the way out there.
How long did
So
that take you?
It took about an hour and a half. Now it takes me only a half hour to get out there,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yes. Wow. Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
Well, the JWV, I am a member.
Which stands for Jewish War Veterans.
at the time, yeah. And I contribute to the other veterans organization too, but I don't attend the meetings. Some of the JWVs I did.
Did you have a number of veterans we've spoken to have mentioned about the racial issues while they were in, and also religious, not persecution, but they felt a little...
A little strange. No,
Strange.
I never felt strange because I was there. A lot of them, were educated were people from universities and colleges that I went with here at the time. There were some Mexicans there. There was a little bit of discrimination with the Mexicans, with
The local people?
The local Mexican from New Mexico.
I see.
At the time, not the local people. There were several in the Army. Also, and there was a little bit of discrimination there, but not. I didn't feel very much about it. Oh, I never had any of that problem.
No, that's good.
Oh, I even had a Jewish captain
Really?
at Fort Leonard Wood. When I told him I'm only supposed to stay here 2 weeks, get my uniform, go back to
Right.
do my technical work for the atomic bomb. I couldn't tell him that because that was
You couldn't even tell
classified.
him that?
I couldn't tell him that, no, because it was classified at the time.
Oh, wow.
This before everybody knew what we were working on at the time. I couldn't. My mother, there was nobody. We weren't allowed to say a word about this.
Now,
Yeah,
that might
have, yes,
was
right.
that part of your basic training? They told you what you could and couldn't.
Not the basic training. When we first entered the Manhattan Project with at Kellogg, and when I went to the Kellogg's and when at Oak Ridge, they read us the Riot Act. If you had, that's
Exactly what you couldn't discuss.
Yeah, we couldn't discuss any of our technical work here, or even mention that we were working on an atomic bomb at the time. It's only after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki everything was open, and after that.
Wow. How do you feel your experiences in the military affected your life?
Well, I think it was a very important thing that we were able to end the World War II, and actually got even with Japan on the Pearl Harbor, which was terrible here. I've gone a number of times to Japan on technical work that I used to do there, and lecture to some of the people over there as well here. And so I mean, it was something that we had to do.
Really?
There were a lot of people that were killed, in 80,000 people in Los Alamos, at Hiroshima, and the equivalent amount in Nagasaki there. And people always ask me, how do you feel about it?
Right.
About working on an atomic bomb? I said, well, we were ready to invade Japan. There were 1 million men that were going to go. They would have been slaughtered over there, going on there. So we saved a lot of American lives here, GI lives. In fact, many of them came up to me afterwards thanking him for working on the atomic bomb.
Wow.
Yeah, otherwise they wouldn't have been around anymore.
I guess most people at the time felt that way after Pearl Harbor. It had to be done.
Yes, it had to be done here, and many afterwards. There's always questions asked. How do you feel about that? We had to do that, and my personal thing is, if we hadn't used it, nobody would know how dangerous that was, even though we did tests at Bikini Islands there about the atomic bombs afterwards and how bad it is. But here was a real living thing that happened here at the time. So I think that it was an experiment, if you would say, here, which was pretty bad for those people that were there, but it had to be done. And shorten the war.
Shorten the war, sure. Did you have any family in Europe during the war?
I never met my grandfathers or my aunts and uncles, and a number of people there were killed during the Holocaust at the time in Europe. Time. But I didn't know them that well. My mother and father came. My father came here in 1912. My mother came in 1921.
I see.
So it was much before the Holocaust at the time. They left relatives there.
In what country?
In Poland, mainly Poland. Yeah.
What are some life lessons you learned from the military?
Well, discipline for one thing, and military objectives here, and that was the main
Discipline's
thing.
good. Yeah. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I never experienced battlefields for one thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't. But it's terrible. The Battle of the Bulge was a terrible thing that happened. And I lost some friends over there because I said the third year of my education at Cooper Union, they called up the reserves at the time, and if it wasn't my mother to stop me from entering the reserves at that time, I wouldn't be here either.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's a terrible thing, but.
has to be done.
Has to be done. I mean, that's it. If you can do it diplomatically, it's another thing. But there's people today, you know, with what's going on with ISIS, unbelievable. It's unbelievable here.
Yeah. What message would you like to leave for future generations who might view this or hear this interview?
I think that they should learn a lesson of that war is terrible, for one thing, but sometimes it's something that has to be done to stop aggression of the terrorists. You try to avoid it as much as possible here, but you got to be firm here, and if it's necessary, such as what's going on now in the Mideast here, you have to protect it. You have to protect yourself and maintain the values that you're standing for. You know, it's very important. The values that you have in this country, the freedom and the not being subjugated and standing up for your rights.
Yeah. Is there anything that you did during your service that you might have you regretted, or?
No, I never did. I mean, there's been the question all the time of what happened with the invention of the testing and use of the atomic bomb at that time. I never had any regrets about this here. I mean, Truman made the decision. There were at the time to use it, and in fact, there were times that said, well, we should have tested it in the Pacific and invite the Japanese general to come. But they would never have given up at the time, you know. It was only when the emperor decided to stop it that they did, because the Japanese generals were just trained for war and tried to overcome and to conquer the U.S. here at the time at the time here. So I have no regrets. Just as I said, it showed how dangerous an atomic bomb is at a time that's a super weapon here, and that proved we have that proof. It's not just something that's theoretical here, or that may be in a test here. That actually happened here, and we should be very cognizant of it before anyone uses it.
Do you think they were aware of its potential for damages and so forth, or not? Did they know the scope of what it was capable?
Before the test? Well, I think after the test of Alamogordo, they began to realize that this is a super weapon. That it's very, what would happen. Then calculations were made actually in what danger we have on that at the time here. So they knew the devastation. Of course, they didn't know that this particular how we would deliver it and how to use it in exploding. But since that time, we've made, you know, the energy of the bombs that we used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki are rather small compared to what we have now with the H-bombs here. There were only 15 kilotons. Now they're up to a megaton, which is 20 to 30 times more dangerous at the time here. So these are super weapons at the air.
Wow. Is there anything you feel we haven't discussed or you'd like to add?
Other than the fact that we're lucky that we were, you know, there was another time. The reason that we started this thing was that we were concerned at that time that the Nazis, Hitler would be getting this bomb. And the only interesting thing, the saving grace, was that Hitler did not support their physicists. Many of them that came here, like Einstein and others, emigrated at the time because they were being discriminated against at the time. So he didn't give the physicists enough funds. What happened is that he supported the rockets mainly, and the V-2s, which bombed London at the time. At the Pinama. So he had von Braun and company that we acquired after the war for their space programs here. But that's one of the things that why we started this whole thing was that we were concerned that Nazi Germany would be acquiring this super weapon at the time.
So that was started before Pearl Harbor.
Oh yeah,
With the idea that it was the Nazis.
It was actually started around that time, around 441. We didn't pick it up till 1942 in here, but it was in competition. We were very concerned that they would get there first.
The Nazis.
The Nazis would get there first at the time, and that's why Roosevelt and Stimson and others put a great deal of effort on it. It was a great foresight by Roosevelt that showed that he supported that to the extent of building these plants, which were unprecedented and extremely expensive at the time. I mean, today it would be 10 times as much.
Yeah, yeah. So you think they were, in the back of their minds, thinking they would use it in Europe?
Yeah, they certainly, they thought that if Hitler would have gotten it here and knew about it, he would use it on England first, absolutely, and then the United States.
Wow.
No question about it.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Meyer, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you so much for your service
you.
and for everything you've told us. Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Okay.